All right, guys, how you doing? Again, I'm Clinton Norris, and I'm here with Carla. And we're going to wait a few minutes for everyone to kind of join us. We're going to be doing a live haircutting demonstration tonight. I'm so thankful for Aaron Johnson and Prive Hair to allow me to have this opportunity to teach a little bit of knowledge and kind of show my approach to haircutting. We are at Palm Mitchell School, San Diego today, and they've allowed us to use their wonderful facility. Margaret Chromians, the owner of the school, Katie Graves, the director, and Kristen Jarrett, the education leader, have allowed me to use their wonderful facility to be able to demonstrate a haircut tonight. So as far as myself, I've been doing hair for about 11 years, or a little bit over a decade. That sounds way cooler when I say a decade. So a little bit over a decade, and early on in my career, I started being an educator from the beginning. So education is where my heart is. When I first started my journey, DJ Muldoon and Manny were the people that were educators at the school, and it made me want to be just like them. So I decided to jump into that field. And it's been the best thing I've ever done. It's taught me to have the answer and to search to myself to find out exactly what it means for me to be a craft hairdresser. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll kind of tell you a little bit about what we're doing with Carla. Today with me I have my good friend Lucas Doney, and he's been a good friend of mine for a long time, and so he's going to be here hosting it a little bit, talking through some of the questions. So if you guys have any questions, please type in anything. I know on a lot of Facebook Lives people do type in anything. Feel free to do that as well. And then Lucas will kind of filter through the questions, get to as many people as he can as possible. After tonight, once it's done, I'm going to go through and I'm going to answer as many questions as possible. So if your question does get answered, if it doesn't get answered, I'm going to go back through and try my hardest to fill everybody in. So again, we have another person with us that's filming. Her name is Ilsa, and she's one of my favorite future professionals that we've had come through the Palm Mitchell School. And I'm opening a salon October 1st. It's called Citizen Salon. So find it on Instagram, Citizen Salon. We open on October 1st. And she was the first hire that we have, and she's been at every event we've done, and as far as like talented future professionals, she's at the top. So we're glad to have her. And then Lucas Doney is going to be going through the questions. So let's talk about Carla. So Carla's a future professional here at the school as well. And I've cut her hair a few times. A long time ago, her hair was long, we cut it short. And a few people have cut little pixie cuts on her, and I feel like she is gorgeous. So a pixie cut looks great on her because it shows off a lot of her features. And at the same time, it might subtract length, but it also exposes her femininity. And that's what we want to do again today. So what I've done here is I've taken a little bit of a parting on one side. I combed everything forward, and there was this little bit of a natural split. So at her parietal ridge, things started to naturally fall where gravity pulled them, and then gravity pulled these forward off the round of her head in the front. So I allowed that to naturally fall. If I were to take a section a little bit higher than that, what happens is this hair that actually lives up here when I cut it to the side would spring back up, and she would have a challenge styling it. As I worked around to the back, I did the exact same thing. I combed all of this to the side, and where this natural split happened at her crown, it allowed this to be, and if she fights her hair's always going to win. So I decided to let that fall naturally. I've only done one side. As we go through the other, we'll split that off as well. And we're going to start at the front. As an overview, I'm going to cut this pretty short at the front hairline, and it's going to gain length as it gets towards the back, and I'm going to control that by an action called over direction. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides, get as symmetric as I can, and then we're going to cut a really fun layer up on the top. I learned it from my friend Aaron. It's called guide skipping, and he uses it with curly hair, but Lucas and I kind of brainstormed a little bit about what we want to do with the haircut, and we're going to make something short, and we're going to leave out a piece, make something short, leave out a piece, short, leave out a piece. We'll style it at the end, and we should be about an hour, I feel like, for the demo. So let's get started. So here in the front hairline, I'm going to take a vertical diagonal back. So that means that the section is going to live more towards the vertical, but the direction of the diagonal is going to be slightly towards the back of her bone structure. So here's my first guide. If this guide sucks, the rest of the haircut sucks. So I want to make sure I spend a good amount of time on this guide making a good decision about what I want to do. So vertical diagonal back helps me out as well because I can see the top of the panel and also the bottom of the panel, and that allows me to create a vertical shape here that's going to best suit her and be the end result of my design. So first section, I'm going to use palm to palm, which means that my palm is going to be facing me. I'm going to start here at the very top of the section, and I want this to be somewhat closer to finger width, so it's a little more than half that length that she has now. All right, so taking that down to my second knuckle, I'm going to stop. I'm going to re-comb this, re-elevate it, and then continue on with the same bit of this section up front. All right.
Aaron Johnson's on.
What's up, Aaron? Thanks for the opportunity. Glad you're here watching. How's New York? Section number 2, same thing, another vertical diagonal back. Section number 1 is going to be my guide of length. So I'm going to scoop that guide up there as well. I'm not going to use any over direction. So section number 2 isn't traveling forward to section number 1. I'm actually letting those live right where they are, just straight out of their base. And I'm not pulling that forward because I don't want any extra length right now towards the back. All right, section number 3, same thing. And now as far as my cutting line, it is a little bit rounded, so it's not actually flat or square on the side. It's a little bit rounded vertically, so it's getting the same length at the very top of the parietal ridge all the way to the bottom length. All right.
Tell me about it. Aaron said he needed a clap.
All right, Aaron's got a clap. All right, again, another vertical diagonal back section. Continuing with the same, and I'm combing. If you notice, I'm combing from my guide, and I'm introducing my guide into my uncut hair. So what that allows me to do is to take the section that I'm cutting straight off of its base. If I decide to turn my comb over and comb it into my guide, what happens is section number 4 now gets longer than section number 3 and creating too much length towards the back. So again, for this front little bit, I want this to be completely balanced from the front hairline to this division line I'm going to work to.
Getting a lot of love on your Facebook Live. A woman named Lauren Norris just joined.
Oh, she sounds really pretty.
Yeah, she sounds okay. Aaron Johnson's on.
Thanks, Aaron.
Joe is on.
Hey, Joe, Big J.
Yeah. You got some future professionals watching. You got a good group.
Good. So again, working here again from the top of the panel all the way to my second knuckle. Again, combing my guide and introducing it into the uncut hair. And so it's going to take the uncut hair straight off its base and allowing that to not get any longer towards the back. So far I like the shape here. Again, this is the basic shape. After it gets dry, we're gonna reassess and look at it and see if we need to adjust anything. A lot of times with hair that's finger width or finger length on the side here, I do like to go back over at the very end with like a little scissor over comb. It takes care of any little bits of extra over direction or knuckle marks that could happen in such a short length. To me, for some reason, finger width is very difficult. Not because it's hard to execute, but it's hard to control. Placing your knuckles against the bone structure and that not to change from section 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 is somewhat difficult. And then again to my second knuckle stopping, all the way down to on top of or behind the ear here. This is a very troublesome spot, I believe. What I like to do is just move the ear out of the way, and then it's no longer a problem. Instead, again, fighting with something that's natural, it's always going to win. And again, too, I'm going to go clean up everything at the very end around the bottom hairline. And so there's my first few sections, so you can see actually where I'm at compared to the shorter length that lives here in the front. So continuing more the same, again, introducing my guide into my uncut section of hair. And then my uncut section of hair number 6 here is just straight off of its base. So I like to use a number system. I got this from a few friends, James Mold and Ben Crace and Lucas Doney. They've spent a lot of time with the guys at Avalon, and they've used a number system, and that's helped me a lot because it allows me to create symmetric balance, and it allows me to have the most amount of control over each section, and is to really methodically work through and understand where I'm at. So if I take 6 sections on one side, I want to be able to do 6 sections on the other. So at section number 7 here, after this, I'm going to start over-directing. So I need to know that for when I get to the other side. At section number 7, the next section needs to start over-directing. So it kind of keeps my balance for both sides. Again, if you guys could, if you're watching this live, please, or if you're not watching it live later, please feel free to hit the share button. Let as many people as you can know about it, just so they can get some free education from Privé. And then fire away at any questions that you guys have or anything that you're wanting to know. I'll even answer questions about myself, I guess, you know, personal life. All right, so section number 8 is now going to go forward to section number 7. So my number system is going to change now. So actually 1 had gone to 2, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 6 to 7, and now 8 is actually going to go to 7. 9 to 8, 10 to 9, and I'm going to continue overdirecting slightly longer because what I want to do is this length here in the crown. I've assessed the bend and I can see where the curl pattern or the wave pattern starts to happen. And if I start to cut that, right now it's actually at the length that's right past the bend of the hair. So here it allows it to sit down. If I decide to cut that any shorter than that, it's going to be right in the middle or towards the end of the bend in the hair. And it's going to tend to stick straight out. And so this is the spot that she doesn't see the most. So she's not looking at the back of her hair, and I think, well, maybe she is, but I think if you did, it'd be more difficult to control it. So I want to be able to make that as easy as possible for her in the back. Yes.
Carla's getting a lot of love. Everybody is admiring how beautiful a model you are, Carla.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you, Carla.
You're getting love from Orlando even.
Nice.
You have a lot of fans on here too, Carla. A lot of your friends are watching you get your hair cut right now.
That's awesome. Picking the model, I believe, is half the battle. You know. So we really try to take care of them as much as possible. So again, I'm just taking everything to the previous now. So my over direction is slightly changed. So I'm going to rotate her a little bit so you guys can see. So again, I took 8 to 7, and now this is 9 to 8. And what I really want to focus on is actually what's at her scalp, so at the root of her hair. So I'm seeing at the root here, this is actually traveling to the previous. Now if it's just straight out of the base, I would know that I haven't over directed it enough. So I want to look right at the root and make sure this hair, you can actually see the way the hair is combed. That root right there is actually pushed forward, so I know that my over direction is forward to the previous section. So I want to keep looking at that. Everything here arbitrarily out in space is not a point that I can make a good decision on. There's no reference point out in space for me to be consistent with. So, but at the scalp, I can actually see my previous section and where I need to over direct it to. So really looking at the root and looking at her scalp, where the hair is actually traveling to, is going to be my best friend as far as, again, being consistent. So as you can see here, the hair is actually getting longer towards the back because of over direction. So anytime I start pulling hair forward and cutting it, it's actually traveling a further distance, and in return, making the hair actually longer. Same, combing that to the previous section. And now coming from the back of my new section forward into my previous. And then again, that combing direction is going to help me with my over direction.
You're getting a lot of love and support for your number system, Clinton. A lot of people are realizing what a useful tool that is.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like so many times I would work methodical and I would think about everything I was doing, but a lot of the times I wasn't really counting, and you know, I would do one thing on one side and just hope that when I got to the next side that it was just as good as the other, and very difficult to do. Symmetry is one of the hardest things I think I've ever tried to do in hair cutting. DJ Muldoon told me if I ever do anything live or a demo, never do anything symmetric. And here I am. Everything I've done on live has been like a symmetric haircut. But I always take his advice, and except for this. So again, I'm using the tight side of my comb for control. I could use the wider side of the comb just to comb through hair and maybe get a little bit of partings and stuff like that with it, but as far as what I'm doing here, I want to be able to have the most amount of control because I'm actually layering the hair and graduating it at the same time. So everything from above the parietal ridge is actually getting longer. As I've over-directed hair, the very top of this section has grown in length. So you can see now my cutting line is actually turned into being square vertically. All right, at the beginning it was kind of rounded up, and as I started working and over-directing hair, I got more vertical as I worked onto the back. So as I get here to the round of the head, it's completely vertical. It's going to save some of that length and some of that bend. Now that I get to the back of this round of the head, I'm actually going to create a stationary guide. So I had no over-direction. I had over-direction to the previous, and now that I'm here to the round of the head, I'm going to start a stationary guide. So all those sections are going to collapse on top of each other, and I'm barely even taking off 1/4 of an inch from this back section here. And again, that's to preserve some of that length.
Got a question from Daniela Ramirez.
Hey Daniela.
She's curious what you'll be doing with the bottom area. I think she's speaking about below the occipital bone.
Yeah, because if you've noticed, I haven't really touched anything below that. one of the things that we liked and we assessed in our haircut is this was already shorter. And looking at it, I like the length in relationship to what I was doing before. Another thing at the very end, what we want to do is we want to create a very strong asymmetric hairline. And by leaving a little bit of extra length and density here towards the bottom, I'll actually spin it around here. Actually leaving some of this length and density is going to allow me to stamp in something that's strong. After I do that, I'm going to assess if I need to take everything above that shorter. So as I stamp in this asymmetric, cool little design line towards the very bottom, then I want to assess, okay, does this actually above the outline need to be shorter? And if it does, I can dust through it with a little scissor comb. But I do like the length that she already has now. Someone taught me a long time ago, it's all about the hair that they leave with on their head, not what's on the floor. And so I'm going to continue to follow that as a little bit of a creed as I work. Okay, so that's this whole side and this whole panel. So as I look at that and I kind of comb that down to where it'll style and where it'll live, I do like it. I like the shorter bit in the front and the extra long length here towards the back, just for practicality. So I like the way this is going so far. So I'm going to rotate her around, and we're going to start here on the other side. So now you guys can actually see how I took my paneling and how I made that decision. So as I comb her hair forward, there's this natural bit of a split that'll start to happen here at the curvature of the bone structure. And so looking at it here, this is where like the round really starts to happen, all right? And as I trace that forward, that's where that natural bend is. Everything from here down is going to naturally live there. Everything from there up is going to naturally live up. So even this piece, so see how that's kind of falling? I want to incorporate that into the side because, again, I don't want her fighting anything that would naturally live on top or on the side. So again, even assessing right there, I feel like that should live on the side.
We've got a question from Tiffany Roberts asking about your scissors.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about what kind of scissors you're using and what size they are. That's your question.
Tiffany Roberts. Hey, Tiffany. So with scissors, I'm pretty passionate about tools, the tools that I use. I played music before I did hair, and I felt like sometimes when I chose like the wrong instrument, the wrong thing would happen. So in choosing a tool, I decided to use a scissor that's a little bit shorter. So I'm using a 5-inch scissor. Maybe you can see it against the black there better. I'm using a 5-inch scissor, so it's pretty short as far as the blade is concerned, but it's no longer than my second knuckle. So I feel like a lot of times if I have the ability to cheat and cut a little longer, I'll do it. So I decided to use a smaller, shorter scissor. Also, it's really good for detail work. I don't know if you've ever tried to, with like a pen or a pencil, choke back, I would take your fingers all the way to the back of the pencil and try to write your name. It looks like a kindergartner wrote it, right? But if you take that same pencil on your fingers and move it up to the very tip of the pencil and try to write your name, it's beautiful. You can do whatever you want to with it. So my hand is actually closer to the end of the scissor, so I have more control over what I'm doing with the blade. And that's a big thing for me, to be able to be in control. Mizutani is the brand of the scissor. I exclusively and only use Mizutani scissors. They've been phenomenal to me as far as reaching out to me and wanting to work with me as an artist and as an educator. My friend Lucas and I have started a little bit of a side project called Varsity Education, and so we believe if people want to be elite, they would be on the varsity team. And we both played sports, and I think that was such a cool thing to us, and not speaking for Lucas, but to me it was. And I don't know, we wanted to create like the varsity team of hair, you know, and our hair cutters. And so we started that, and we teamed up with Mizutani. They actually made us this specific scissor. This scissor doesn't exist unless you get it through us. It even has our little varsity logo on there. And so we collaborated with Mizutani to make this special scissor for us. We teach classes, Lucas and I together, and we call them varsity education classes. We do a few a year. We have one coming up on Monday that is sold out. We're very excited about that. And yeah, if you guys follow us on social media, Clinton Cuts Hair or Lucas Doney on Instagram, we tend to post about it a lot. We have an Instagram that we're gonna bring to life very soon. And so that'll possibly and potentially be a place where everyone can go and kind of find out some information about classes. All right, so Mizutani scissors, 5 inches. Yeah. So it's a really long explanation for an answer I could have given really short.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I've done the same thing I did on the other. My finger is going to be my how I relate that from side to side to be similar. So finger width here, I rotated that up and made a vertical cutting line that was curvy or rounded. Essentially layering the hair. And then if you notice, my fingers are different. My fingertips are now down, and my scissors are up. So I've changed my cutting direction. So since I want to have another vertical diagonal back, for me to do this and rotate my body, it's going to be very difficult, and it's not going to last for very long. So I've decided to turn my hand over. So I just switched my elbows. So my left elbow is now in the air. My right elbow is down. Some people might think that they would just turn their hand over and start cutting on the outside of their hand. So a few different things happen when you cut on the outside of your fingers. So the way that my arm is made, my elbow is above my section, so I'm going to tend to push this hair down. Same thing if I have my elbow below, I'm going to start to pull it down as well. If I actually rotate my hand over, it's very easy for me to lift up very high. It's very difficult for me to lower it. So cutting here in my fingers allows me to keep this where I need it to be instead of elevating it too high as I work towards the back, and I want to be consistent.
Sherry Pop.
Hey, Sherry Pop.
From Virginia Beach, Virginia.
I like that, Sherry Pop.
She just joined recently, and she just wanted a little explanation of the number system you're going to use.
So as far as a number system, so I want to be able to count my sections and make things as symmetric as possible. I want to work with discipline, and I want to be dedicated to that process. So I'm using a number system where section number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I'm counting all my sections, so I do the same thing on both sides. So if I start utilizing over direction to make a longer link towards the back, I want to be able to count my sections to know where I started to over direct. Or just however many sections I use, I want to be able to use that same amount of sections and same section size from front to back. So the number system helps me out a lot with balance and just working methodically as well. So as far as the number system that I'm using here is my first guide that I cut at the very front hairline, I actually combed away from that, introduced that to section number 2. So section number 2 is the same as section number 1. 2 to 3, and 3 to 4 is where I'm at now. And I'm working all the way to section number 7. In section number 7, I'll start over directing here.
You've got a lot of people on. You got some people excited about the scissor. You've got people saying they're so lucky to have Clinton as a learning leader.
That's awesome.
They were at Palmer Middle School. That's from Rosina.
Hey Rosina, oh, I love her.
Yeah.
She's so great. Hey Rosina.
A lot of hearts. A lot of people saying they love that size of scissor.
Perfect.
How much of a difference the haircut is making. It's looking incredible. People are loving it.
Thank you guys so much. All right, so here is section number 7, and then from then on, I'm going to start over directing forward.
You got a comment that says, Clinton is really nice. I agree.
Thank you.
I agree. Clinton is very nice.
Yeah, why not be, you know what I mean? Clinton is really nice. Who said that?
Isela Contreras?
She's really nice for saying that, right?
Yeah, she is very nice. I think that's Carla's friend.
Oops,
Is
probably.
that your friend, Carla?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Carla's really nice too.
So now, as you can tell, for those of you guys who have joined us just for this side, with my sectioning and with the control up here, what I started to do is actually comb forward. So this actually is now again being over directed forward to its previous. So I'm actually combing from the other side. This side I started combing backwards. This side here I'm actually combing forward so it can over direct to its previous. So again here I'm looking at the root and making sure that's only traveling one section forward. Looking at the root is going to tell me everything. If I don't look at the root, it's not going to allow me to know how far forward the hair is traveling. And again, I don't want to trust space. Right? I want to be able to make a really good decision about how that hair is traveling forward. So looking at the root, I can see that that section is traveling forward just one section.
You have a question about what brand of comb you're using?
So this is a Sessabon comb. I got introduced to a Sessabon when I was a student 11 years ago by my teacher Manny. It was always so cool when he gave people scissors, and I gave people scissors, I wish. When he gave people combs, and he gave me this Sessabon. I actually have a few of them, but I always use the one that he gave me. I just feel like it's kind of cool, and I still want to cut hair like Manny, so for some reason I feel like there's a little bit of magic in this comb. And I like it a lot because of the flexibility in the comb. It's not too rigid. The teeth aren't too pointy. Sometimes a wise part comb can get a little too pointy, and it can kind of scratch the scalp a little bit. I don't love that. But Sessabon comb has never done me wrong, and I feel like I get the most control out of this comb more than any other. So Sessabon comb. It comes in two colors. Green is like the classic, and then Hairbrained actually has them in white. So that's been a kind of cool one.
So you got a couple questions too. Sally Russell just joined.
Hey Sally.
She was curious if you travel for your classes.
Yeah, we've been in the works talking to Mizutani Scissors on the phone about our varsity education and taking those classes to different cities, and we would absolutely love to, you know. I was talking to Lucas yesterday. I've chosen to work with him. He's one of my best friends in my entire life. I'm older now, and so I've had a lot of them, and out of my entire life, Lucas has been one of my best friends, and so he's always taught me, I just want to do cool stuff with my friends. You know, that's like my goal in life, is just to do cool stuff with my friends. And so, you know, we want to be able to, you know, educate whoever and be a part of people's journey as they go through, and people that just want to make themselves better. And so working with him has allowed us to have the ability to teach classes together. I think teaching classes by myself is somewhat boring. So I want his perspective as well on these classes. So I believe that yes, we would travel to teach classes upon request. So slide into my DMs. Okay.
You also got a privé. They're saying thank you for being on the page today. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
You've got a question from Randy.
Hey Randy.
That says, are you using a cutting lotion or any other product in the hair? It seems to be staying in place very well and you haven't wet it down again.
Awesome question. So I would see people cut hair too and ask that same question, like, man, like how is the hair staying there and it still looks really shiny? I work for Paul Mitchell, and so they've, some of the new products have been some of my favorites. With her, I kind of prepped her a little bit with the styling treatment oil. The word oil scares me to death. I always think when I put oil in someone's hair, it's going to be gross and greasy and things like that. But with the styling treatment oil, it's actually a dry oil. So with that being a dry oil, it allows it to go past just the cuticle layer. And it keeps it hydrated, and I don't have to kind of respray her down over and over again, which I don't want to do, but I might do here in a second because I feel like that is kind of drying out a little bit. And she has amazing hair, so no matter what I'm doing to it, like it's looking good. And again, that's why I chose her as a model. Okay, so now that I've completed both sides, we're going to start working through the top. All right, and so I'm going to comb all the hair in the direction that it naturally lives.
Maybe elaborate on that. You've got a few questions about short hair growth patterns and how you deal with cowlicks and things like that. So it's a good point to touch on now. Yeah, so short hair is going to be more reactive than long hair.
I rarely am I looking at growth patterns in the crown area if their hair is down to the middle of their back. Now once the hair gets shorter and I started looking at the bend of the hair, things can start happening. So at her crown, there's a little bit of an irregularity in growth. I can kind of turn her. So she has this little like bump and growth pattern here. So I decided when we got to this round of the head here, it was about section number 10 on each side, we created a stationary guide. And that allowed this very center piece to overdirect all the way out to the side, which creates longer length here in the center, which leaves the rest of the bend, so it'll be like controlled and down. So that's what I did with that portion there. I overdirected the hair to make it longer. Now, I believe with growth patterns, that like a cowlick is what we tend to call those, they need to be short or they need to be long. They need to be long or gone. So with hers, based on her limitation, she wants it to be able to style it pretty easy. I wanted to create more length there so it can style itself. So a lot of times with growth patterns, I want them to be able to be short or long. So if she didn't care and we wanted to do something a little extra today, then I would have maybe taken this really short over her crown. But we want to do something a little bit more salon friendly, guest friendly, and not necessarily have to put her in a world where it's extra creative every day. Okay, so I'm going to take a section from parietal ridge to parietal ridge, and I'm going to control this up and I'm going to cut over top of my fingers. So I have a good amount of length here. So one of the things that I am going to do is I'm going to assess where, you know, section number 9 or so was, and I'm going to connect it to this. Okay, so as I elevate this section number 9, I'm going to utilize that as a guide of length. I'm going to incorporate that into my section here. And I'm going to elevate this straight off of its base from the parietal ridge using that guide of length. And I'm going to work up here to my second knuckle. And then I'm going to use the curvature of my fingers to help me make this curvy line. I'm going to work that across the top, all the way to the parietal ridge on the other side. And so again, I'm looking at the root. I'm making sure that at the root here, it's coming straight off of its base, and I'm going to connect it into the other side.
Getting a lot of love for your haircut.
It's great.
A lot of people want to have you come to their salon,
Yeah.
schools.
Would love that.
A lot of people interested in having you in their territory.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I think that, you know, I travel a good amount of time. I'm a part of the Advanced Academy cutting team for Paul Mitchell. And so we actually, I travel to other schools and teach their teachers, but a lot of times I'm not working in 2 salons. Lucas and I educate at a salon here in town, and it's called Salon on 30th. It's one of my favorite salons locally. And working with them has been phenomenal, seeing their team grow. Anybody interested in San Diego working at a salon that's going to push you and give you a lot of education, that's the one. So we do a lot of education there, which is really fun. And so I believe Lucas and I both love that bit of education. So I'm going to move on. So this next section here that you see, I'm actually not going to cut that at all. So my previous section I cut, section number 2, I'm going to leave long. Because I do want a lot of texture here. So I'm going to have a short, long, short, long, short, long. And so my next section here across the top, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to actually connect it into the side using that bit of length at the parietal ridge. And I'm cutting a very round cutting line from parietal across the parietal plate into the parietal ridge here on the other side. And making that connection. So now I have a short, long, short, long. So I'm going to actually, if you want to stand there, I'm going to turn to the side. And I'm going to lift just those 2 sections up, and you're going to be able to see short, long, short. All right, so it's going to give her a lot of texture, a lot of movement. You can already see there's so much space and a lot of things going on there. So if she wanted to kind of blast some texture in her hair, I think it'd be very easy for her to do. So short, long, short. So section number 4, my even numbers is going to be long, and then my odd number is going to be short. So again,
we've got a few questions.
Yeah, of course.
Kristen.
Hey, Kristen.
She asked why you're stopping at your second knuckle. She was told that that was just a hair school rule.
Right. That's a. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Sure. I mean, I think that a lot of people hear that in hair school, and they maybe didn't have someone to tell them why they do that. So if you look at your fingers, hopefully everybody that's watching on Facebook is going to look at their first 2 fingers where they control hair. And what happens is after our second knuckle, there's a really huge gap. And what that gap does is it releases a lot of tension. You have less control that happens back there. And if we look at mine, I'm going to dust all this off real quick. So if we look at mine, here, these work together pretty flat, but through here there's a bigger space. So if you could see light through it, if we had a light going behind it, there'd be a lot more space there. Here it's all connected. So if I pick up a section of hair, this is going to have a lot less tension, and this is going to have more. So I'm going to get a really lumpy or like bumpy end result. That's not what I want. So by cutting only to my second knuckle, I get more control, a consistent end result as well. So here we can see short, long, short, long, short. And then we're going to make this last one long, but we're going to trim it because it does get a little long. So this last long one, I am going to adjust just a little bit. So I'm taking my last section here, lifting it up. I'm just going to trim these ends. I hope that answered the question of the second knuckle.
I think you did.
Okay.
We've got a few people. One person, Madison, is asking if you'll be at Caper 2018.
Hey, Madison. So Caper is an event that's for future professionals put on by Paul Mitchell, our company, and Paul Mitchell Schools. Year before last, I was an artist and I got to be on stage, which was super fun. And I'm actually going to be there doing a mini class the very first day of Caper. So Lucas and I together, when everybody gets to Caper, we're going to be doing a mini class the very first day. So we're really excited about that. So the day you guys get there, we'll post some things on our social media so you guys will know when and where we'll be and how to be a part of that. So now I am going to kind of recap everything. I'm going to turn to the side and I'm going to take a section from front to back. That way you're going to be able to see these shorter and longer portions of hair. So I'm going to comb everything forward. You can actually see it here. If you can kind of look from the front, can you see? Short, long, short, long, short, long. Okay? And this is not the end result, so I don't think that hair is just going to be like this. But we're going to take a section here through the front. We're going to be able to see that long piece. Short, long, short, long, short, long. Okay? So after I blow dry this and get this controlled, what we're going to do is, let me help you out with that. What we're going to do is I'm going to work around her bottom hairline, and then I'm going to point cut through some of this. So we're going to go through some lessons of what point cutting is, when to point cut, how to point cut. I might do some surface cutting, sliding through some of this texture to break up those longer pieces because I haven't tested them at all. So I'm going to put these down, and I'm going to grab my blow dryer and my brush. I'm going to put a little more styling treatment oil, I believe, in her hair as well. So this is the styling treatment oil I was talking about earlier. It's one of my favorite products of all time. And for her, I mean, since I put a little bit in there when it was wet, I don't want to put too much because I don't want it to look greasy or overly done, which rarely have I ever had that issue with styling treatment oil since it is a dry oil. So I'm going to use just my fingertips to put that in, even here through the back and through the sides to give it a little bit of shine and a little bit of control. I felt like when I first started utilizing a lot of product, if a little bit was good, a lot was better. That's not true. Since she had a little bit of moisture in her hair before, it kind of broke up some of that product. But here you can already see without it styling at all, it already has some movement and texture to it. So what I want to do is I'm going to use my brush, I'm going to blow dry it. I want to have somewhat of a loose blow dry. I don't want it to be overly styled and overly controlled because, again, we are creating a little bit of a loose texture on the top. I'm going to drop my blow dryer with all that styling treatment oil on my hand. So I'm going to use my blow dryer and I'm going to actually do a wrap drying technique. So I'm going to wrap this over to one side, standing behind her. I'm going to switch my hands and then I'm going to wrap dry this actually to the other side. The benefit of doing that is going to take the root direction and push it to the right and to the left, which is going to give it a little bit of natural volume. Now I'm not talking about teasing volume, but I'm talking about a little bit of volume so it looks natural as if it were to air dry, just to give it a little bit of movement to it.
You've got, I believe it's Ginny.
Hey Ginny.
Asking if this is a good haircut with someone with thinner hair on top.
I think so. You could do this if someone had a little bit finer or lower density. You could do it. Only thing I would watch out for is exposure of the scalp. I think if you take those shorter pieces, maybe too short, it'll expose too much and it'll make their hair look even finer than it already is. So I wouldn't necessarily do that on someone that had like finer hair. Carla has a great amount of hair, so it gives me the ability to kind of make those shorter pieces short and it'd be okay. But someone with finer, low density, I might just do something like a balanced layer, a square layer from front to back, and then maybe create some texture by another method, not necessarily making hair short. Good question though, really good question.
Justin Thomas in Sacramento says
hey.
He loves watching me cut hair. Clinton cuts hair.
Yeah. Hey Justin Thomas. I think Justin Thomas was at Palawan or Federico, right?
Yeah. Adam was on too. I don't know if he's still on, but he was.
Nice. Both those guys are very well respected guys in our industry for sure. Honor that you guys are watching. Thank you.
Zoe jumped on. She says you're crushing it.
Hey Zoe.
A lot of great feedback. Everybody's loving the end results.
Thank you.
A couple of questions asking if it would be different than channel cutting. I think you answered one question about point cutting already without even asking it.
Yeah. Yeah, channel cutting, I mean, everybody has the same words, but we use a different dictionary. And so, I don't want to say one thing is channel cutting or not. Some people call this trench cutting, you know what I mean? So, I don't really care what we call it, more so than what the end result is. Really with her, again, I wanted her to have shorter bits and longer bits based off control. not off of something that was random. So with discipline and control, it allowed me to create a little bit of space and movement on the interior. And we're going to change. We're going to go through this. We're going to point cut some of this, give it a little bit of space and a little bit of movement to it. And I think I'm almost done with the blow dry portion.
Everybody's loving your haircut. You've got Sherry popping back in, asking what Instagram links. What are Instagram links are?
So mine is pretty easy to remember. It's Clinton Cuts Hair. That's all it is. I only cut hair too, you know. I feel like I want to do color, and I probably should. I've been watching a lot of Pretty Little Ombre, and I feel like it makes me want to do color. So, Clinton Cuts Hair, to answer your question. And then Lucas Doney, Lucasdoney. You can follow both of us on social media and kind of find out a little bit of updates about what we're doing. So now I'm going through and I'm using my fingers to lift it, give it a little bit of space, get that little last bit of moisture out, and seeing the hair for where it actually falls.
Maria has a question. She's curious if it look good if you're trying to like just curl the top of your hair.
She has a little bit of wave pattern anyways. I think if we wanted to actually use an iron, she said she wanted less styling. So I created the style by the haircut. If she told me every day she curls the top of her hair, I would have left some more length. Actually, maybe would have barely trimmed her hair and kind of left the length that she had. But as far as what we want as an end result for Carla, I don't think that she could actually put an iron in it right now and make it look awesome. I think she could only curl the long pieces, which might look funny. But as far as wanting to curl her hair, I would have left everything longer and not necessarily cut those bits shorter. Very good question.
Amanda Green.
Hey, Amanda Green.
Has a question. She's asking, how much of a disconnect do you use on top in the long to short areas, or is that more preference? So I think maybe how you got the length for the short bits?
Yeah, so I could, let me step back in. What I could do is I could take those really, really short, or I could leave them really, really long. And the more separation from longer length to shorter length, the edgier it's going to be. So like this is like super, super long. It's going to hang over really far on the side, and it's going to be a little more edgy than we really want it to be. And I don't necessarily want it to be an edgy haircut. I want it to be a functional haircut. And so what I did is I actually used the hair at the parietal ridge because I wanted it to be a similar story throughout the haircut. Even though there was a disconnection, I wanted there to be something that tied everything together. So all the length at the parietal ridge that is balanced, I actually took that and cut a round cutting line for the short piece, left a piece out, round cutting line vertically, layered it, left out a piece, round vertical cutting line. So that way it tied into the sides at each little piece. So there was a connection and there was a story. So now the pieces that I haven't cut, I'm going to go back through. I'm going to take those and I'm going to give them a little bit of space. So point cutting, there's always a debate when we get to point cutting. And point cutting to me, it should be like hairspray. It's like a tiny little bit of an adjustment to the haircut. It shouldn't, I don't really create a shape by point cutting. I actually create a strong, checkable, visual shape, and then I go back and see and assess the hair once it's dry. Then I can start making the space as I see appropriate. Instead of when the hair's wet, clumped together, then making all these holes in it and wishing I didn't. So here, now that the hair's dry, I can take the hair and see where all the ends are, and I can go through and create some space. So what I'm doing now is just closing my scissor on the ends of the hair, and my scissor is completely parallel to the hair. One of the reasons that I did actually apply blow drying to it is because I wanted to make sure the ends were all controlled and going the same direction. So that way when I point cut, I could take out the same amount of space.
So what kind of adjustments would you make on the top area as far as skipping your guide if you had like a strong growth pattern in the front?
I would make sure that, again, like any kind of growth pattern, now they need to be long or gone. So if she had an irregularity in growth pattern in the front, then I would want to make that either long or gone. So if I got to the front here, I would make sure, if I were counting my sections, that this last section these are my even sections, the longer ones. So I'd actually maybe count backwards and start working backwards, leaving that front section out, next section short. That way it had a longer length to it, and we wouldn't have to worry about any irregularities in growth pattern. Again, so looking here at the very end, I've made some space, and then at the very corner here, I want to add just a little bit more so that can be pretty seamless as it drops.
Stephanie Young has a question asking if this haircut would work on ethnic hair.
It depends on what ethnicity we are talking about. I'm assuming African American. I'm just going to assume. So if she had extra curly hair and it actually made an actual curl pattern, which from the base, if it started to make like a little spiral or like a little, what do you call it, like a little spring, if it did that, I would do a completely different haircut. I wouldn't do something where it had a shorter piece and a longer piece, because I actually have pretty curly hair, and for me, if someone cuts a shorter piece and a longer piece, those two curls react totally differently. And so those two different curl patterns would react differently. They would look uneven, and it would look more like a mistake than something that was on purpose. And if we do anything creative, it needs to look like we've done something on purpose instead of it just so happened to look right. So based off of that ethnicity, being extra curly, or my sister has extremely curly hair, I wouldn't do this haircut on her either, just based on her curl pattern and the unevenness that would happen of the curls. Any kind of wave pattern somewhat helps out with a little bit of style, because you start to see these little like movements in the hair because her hair is actually wavy. So you know, with her ethnicity, I mean, she could have straight hair or curly hair. It doesn't matter to me. But at the same time, I want straight hair to react a certain way. Curly hair is going to react a different way. A lot of it's really based off of choice of length, right? The shorter I make it, the curlier it's going to appear, and the longer I make it, the more weight's going to be on each individual curl, and it's going to be longer. It also depends on the way that they wear their hair. So if she had extra curly hair and she decided to wear her hair with a relaxer in it, then absolutely I could do something like this. Grow out might be crazy, because those shorter pieces, when the grow out happens, might be kind of wild. But it all depends. I think if someone does their relaxer touch up all the time, you know, I would hook them up with this for sure. Okay, so here's my last bit of point cutting for the very front hairline. So as we notice now too, everything is somewhat integrated into itself, especially when it's styled over to the side there. It gives a little bit of texture and movement to it. If she wanted to make this a little bit edgier, she absolutely could. And the way that she would do that is maybe with the addition of some product. One last thing I'm going to do is the very first section that I cut. I'm actually going to look at that section there, and I'm going to give it a little bit of space. This is the only short section that's actually going to live on the very top and be very visible. So I want to give that a little bit of texture and movement and space. All right. So last few things I'm going to do, I'm going to raise her up a little bit. Last things we have to do is we're going to dial in her hairline, and the connection point here that I cut vertically, I'm going to soften that, and then we should be set. So I'm going to turn her to the side, and one thing I do want to adjust is as I cut vertically, some of this didn't ever really reach to my cutting line. So one of the things that I can do is horizontally here, take that last little bit of an edge. I could do two things. One, I could actually take it vertically in my fingers and cut that corner off. To me, I feel like the dangers of doing that is she does have this irregularity and growth pattern there, so I don't necessarily want to do that. So what I can do is leave her actual length that she has, take it here in my comb, and create a little bit of space horizontally. And that's where I see the weight line, so that's where I want to attack it. And so if you notice, I'm not going all the way back here to the back of the comb, because that's where that irregularity lives. And so that gives it a little bit of space. I didn't destroy the shape. If you were to pick it up and cross-check it, you would still see that. But there is a little bit more space there. So I'm going to do the same thing here to the other side. As I go through the top of that, there's not as much of one here, just based off previous haircut. But I am going to give that a little space at the corner. Same through here.
You have a lot of people that love the way you teach, Clinton, your tone of voice, how you explain things.
Thank you.
Trisha Anderson, who's a graduate of Sassoon, London, and 33 years in the business, is enjoying it so much.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. And then last little bit, this little bit here, I don't want her to have to deal with. And so we've seen Carla through her journey of longer hair to shorter hair. A lot of times she wore her hair down here in the front. One thing I want to do is give it a little bit of encouragement and direction to live to the side. And so I'm actually going to overdeck this hair, pull it away from the length that I want to keep. And I'm just going to adjust this one corner here. And I'm going to use just the edge of my scissor to make that softer as it falls over the front hairline. Still cutting a pretty strong line, but I want to have a little bit of space. Sorry, the edge a little bit. Same thing here out to the side. And what that's going to do, if you kind of see how that reacts there, it's going to give her a little short to long push there through the front. That's pretty. Okay, for the last little bits here, I'm actually going to use my scissors here at the very front hairline just to create a little bit of control. And so since we have something so soft here, what I want to do is just with the edge of my scissor, I want to take out this little bit of extra length that lives here at the very frontal, all the way up to where that short bit was. What that'll do is give it a little bit of control to the front hairline. Now I don't want to do too much to where it looks like I lined her up, right? You don't want that either, right? So I just want to be able to take off any excess that lives in front of the hairline, still working soft. And again, just at the edge of her hairline. I do like these little feminine bits here, is what we always call them, fangs, feminine bits, whatever you want to call them, but I do like those. It gives a little character and personality to them. And then here over the ear, I'm just going to use my scissor and I'm going to cut around the ear. I feel like a lot of times people, when they're cutting women's hair that's short, they're scared to cut around the ear. I do believe it can look too masculine if they take it too high. But what we're doing here is we're just removing anything that's going to live over top of her natural hairline, so nothing is really changing. What could be worse is that she has long, wispy hair that lives over top of her ear. I believe that would be actually worse. So just removing a little bit of that. I'm going to have her actually tilt her head over to the left, and then I'm going to push her ear forward, comb all of this hair down, and then I'm going to adjust a little bit of this with my scissor behind her ear. I do choose a scissor too that the very end of the scissor is very small and skinny. Again, it allows me to have a little bit more control. Something that's a little bigger and more rounded, I have more of a difficult time, again, controlling that. All right, so I'm happy with the way that looks. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to tilt away from us, and then I'm going to pull her ear forward, comb all of that down, and then with my scissor, can go through and adjust that little bit above the ear. And a lot of times I feel like, again, being nervous about being above the ear is more of you being in control of where her ear is. I have had a few people that their ears are really strong. Have you guys felt that? Where their ears just won't move, and I'm like, I have no idea what to do, and I kind of improvise a little bit, but that's very few and far between as far as that's concerned. So
I've got
again,
a question. Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Wants maybe a little bit more of an explanation on how you switched your hand position and maybe how you hold your scissors.
As far as when I cut around the ear?
Yeah.
So here I'm actually standing in front of Carla. To me, this is my more comfortable side. What it allows me to do is pull her ear forward, and I can work from bottom to top. And then now this becomes difficult to me, working from lower to higher away from me. That's more difficult. So on the other side, if I switch her around, this is actually how I was working here. To me, it was very easy to work for me from bottom to top like this, but then I move behind her here, and I'm actually on the other side of her almost, and cutting from bottom to top. What I would prefer is there to be a mirror right here, and that way I could look in the mirror and maybe sculpt through that hairline. Here I was able to stand in the front and turn her head away from me to be able to work around her ear a little bit easier. Again, this front part right here, bottom to top, is hard, and this is easier for me here. So I worked a lot more of my shape that way, and then just dialed this in. The very front here, I'm going to do the same as I did on the other, just kind of following her natural hairline, using just the end of my scissor. And I want to make that as natural as possible. My hair all the single ladies in the background.
Yeah. Caitlin Cooper's asking, when it comes to this type of haircut, is it a lot of point cutting or no?
I kind of talked about it a little bit. I prefer cutting the foundational shape when it is like a strong, checkable shape. I don't necessarily like to point cut through everything because, again, even just the way I cut hair, the way I think about it is I want to create something that's on purpose, you know, and a lot of times there's some haircuts that can happen by accident and they happen to look good, but something like this is something that works with purpose and discipline and intent. Whereas, again, point cutting everything, I mean, it can kind of look good maybe, and then it's like 50% of the time it could look all right. So the last thing that we're going to do is I'm going to create a little bit of a design line for the very back. So I'm going to have her tilt forward, and we're going to look at her natural growth pattern all together here as a group.
You've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Trisha Anderson
Hey,
is
Trish.
back on.
Hey,
She said
Trisha.
she's a Hikari shear user.
Yeah.
She's asking about the ones you're using.
Yeah.
And you've got some people asking about the brush and maybe how much time you'd allow for this haircut.
So let's start with Hikari. I like Hikari. They're some of my favorites. New Cosmos, I think Hikari makes, and they've always been phenomenal. Every one I've used. But again, Mizutani has been so good to us, and they make so many scissors that are for every hairdresser. If you like long scissors, they have beautiful long scissors. They have short scissors, beautiful short scissors. But for me, I choose this one as well. What were some of the other questions? Which brush? The brush I was just using right now?
The brush, yeah.
This one? This little Seiko brush? Yeah, okay. So Seiko brush has always been awesome. It helps just like kind of make things a little bit cleaner. But as far as that goes, I want to be able to use something to clean off all the little hair. Okay, so if you notice her hair all pushes to this one corner. So this is where we can get a little more creative. I'm going to start here from where that little bit of a curve is. And I'm going to work up to where her hair gets finer. If you could tell, like her hair actually, she has a pretty low hairline. But as I work through here, what I'm doing is I'm just following the density of what her natural hairline is, okay? And this is where I feel like things can be a little bit more creative. Working through here, kind of looking at where her natural hairline exists and what I can change is going to dictate a lot to me. This again is a more creative little area that we have to work through, and I'm going to adjust that a little bit and make a little bit of a little peak here on this other side. So again, all of this is pretty weak through here, so I want to be able to change that, and I want to work pretty flat through here. And I'm going to sharpen it up just by taking some of the hair off her neck with a little bit of a trimmer. Stay there, I want to move around to the side. All right. And so here, I'm going to take that little bit of a point, and we're going to actually work up from that to where it's a little bit skinnier through this side. So I have this little juxtaposition of shape where this is a little bit more diagonal, and this has somewhat of a curve to it, and it gets a little flatter through the sides. I'm going to use a trimmer here just to take all the hair off of her neck, and then we will be done. So here, as we work through, I'm just going to take off neck hair from there down. I'm not really adjusting my line at all because I want to be able to create that with my scissor. This is just removing some of the hair from her neck. And then same thing here, just under where I've cut my line, I want to be able to take that hair off. I could use a scissor to remove all of this, but her hair's pretty coarse, and it's somewhat long, so it would take me a little bit of time to get through that and to get it as close as I can here. All right, and so just to make sure I get all these little guys. So just as a little bit, and I actually like that, I don't think I'm going to scissor or comb it. So just as a little bit of a recap, let's look at Carla real quick. This is good. So what we did is we actually took vertical diagonal back sections, we layered through. We didn't start over directing until we got to behind the ear to a previous. Once we got about the section number 10 or so, we started to create a stationary guide, which gave her a little bit of length at her crown, just to preserve a little bit of length, so we assessed the bend in this curl so we could leave that length. Here in the front, we did the same thing. We started over directing behind the ear to the previous section at number 7. 10 became a stationary. And for the top, we got a little bit creative. We actually cut a very short section through the top that was round vertically. We skipped a section, and then every section that was an odd section we made short. Every even section we left out. We point cut the top, dialed around the ear, and we straighten up the hairline to make it somewhat creative. So just to close everything up, thank you guys so much. If you could share this video with everybody that you can. Thank you to Privé, and thank you to Paul Mitchell School of San Diego for letting me use the facility, and hope to see you guys soon. Thank you.